I still remember the way she clutched the fabric like it was the last piece of her life she could still control. The woman stood at my doorway just before sunset, her eyes swollen and red, her breath shaky, her fingers trembling around a crumpled evening dress that had clearly seen more pain than wear. I was closing the shop for the day, exhausted from hemming skirts and repairing zippers, but something in her expression froze me in place. She wasn't just asking for a favour, she was asking for a lifeline. "Please," she whispered, her voice nearly cracking under the weight of whatever she was carrying. "Fix this for me. Tonight, I'll pay anything. I just need it to look perfect." The desperation in her voice cut through me. I should have asked questions, but something in me knew she had already answered enough in her own trembling silence. I unlocked the shop again and let her in. Under the harsh white lights, the dress told a story long before she did. Deep tears along the seams, a few stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood, and a ripped strap that seemed yanked rather than worn out. She stood beside me, wringing her hands, watching as if the dress might open its mouth and betray her secrets. I asked gently, "What happened?" She blinked fast, looked away, and shook her head. "It doesn't matter. It just has to be fixed by morning." Every instinct in me wanted to know more, but her trembling shoulders told me pushing her might break her entirely. So I nodded. She exhaled shakily, as though she hadn't expected kindness. As I examined the torn stitches, she pulled out a small envelope and placed it on my work table. "If I don't come back for it," she said quietly, "keep that. It explains everything." My stomach tightened. Nobody said things like that unless they were preparing for something final. Before I could ask what she meant, she hurried toward the door. "Wait," I called. "Your name?" She paused with her hand on the handle, her face half shadowed by the dim hallway light. "Elena," she murmured, then disappeared into the night. I stood alone in the silence of my shop, staring at the broken dress. Something about it felt wrong, like the fabric itself carried fear. I wanted to open the envelope she left, but guilt kept my fingers away. She asked me to wait, so I waited. Hours passed, the rhythmic tapping of my sewing machine breaking the suffocating quiet. I kept glancing at the clock, anxiety crawling under my skin. Why would a woman bring me such a ruined dress at almost nightfall? Why wouldn't she explain the stains? Why leave an envelope that explains everything? And why was I suddenly terrified for her? By midnight, the dress looked whole again, beautiful even. But the uneasiness in my chest had only grown heavier. I locked up, took the dress home with me, and placed it carefully on the mannequin in my living room. My son was already asleep. The house was quiet, but my mind raced with questions. I barely slept that night, listening for footsteps, for a knock, for anything that would tell me Elena was safe. But morning came with no sign of her. Instead, sunlight leaked through the curtains, and my son shuffled into the room holding a folded newspaper, yawning. "Mom," he said, dropping it onto my lap. This was on the porch. The moment my eyes fell on the front page, my heart slammed against my ribs. The headline wasn't loud or bold, just chilling. "Local woman found dead near Riverside Hotel." But it was her picture that stole the air from my lungs. Elena, the same haunted eyes, the same face shadowed in fear. I felt the room tilt. My hands shook so hard the paper rustled like dry leaves. My son frowned and asked what was wrong, but my throat had closed. I looked at the mannequin in the corner, at the dress, her dress, restored, whole, waiting for a woman who would never return. And then I remembered the envelope, the one she said would explain everything. I stood, legs weak, heart pounding, and grabbed it from my work bag. The paper felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of her last breath. I hesitated. Once I opened it, whatever truth she had carried would become mine. Whatever darkness she was running from would no longer be a stranger's tragedy. It would be something I could never unknow. My fingers finally tore the flap. Inside was a single photograph, A man standing beside Elena, his hand gripping her arm a little too tightly. And behind them, my blood froze, because I recognised the room. I recognised the wallpaper. I recognised the hotel. And I recognised the man. I had stitched a suit for him 2 weeks ago. My breath caught as I stared at the man in the photograph, his smile thin and cold, his hand clamped around Elena's arm like ownership instead of affection. His face had lingered in my memory from the fitting appointment, sharp jawline, expensive taste, the kind of man who walked into a room already convinced he owned it. He wasn't rude, but there was something off in the way his eyes drifted over everything like he was measuring its worth, including me, including my shop. He had told me the suit was for a special evening, and at the time I thought nothing of it. Just another customer, just another repair. But now, looking at the photograph, his presence felt like a shadow crawling up my spine. I studied the background next. A gaudy gold wallpaper, patterned carpet, a large ornate mirror behind them, the Riverside Hotel's ballroom. Everyone in town knew it, everyone in town whispered about it. A place where money bought silence, where secrets were exchanged more often than drinks. I felt sick. Had Elena been running from him? Had the dress been torn in that hotel? Had the stains, my stomach twisted, come from him? The questions clawed at me until I couldn't sit still. I set the photograph down, noticing faint handwriting on the back. A single sentence, scribbled in a shaky rush. If he finds out, burn everything. A cold shiver rippled down my arms. If who finds out, what was I supposed to burn? The dress? The photograph? The envelope? Or something else entirely? My son walked into the kitchen, his backpack slung over one shoulder, oblivious to the storm building inside me. "Mum, can I have cereal?" I nodded stiffly, trying to hide the trembling in my hands. I couldn't let him sense my fear. Not yet. Not until I understood what I was dealing with. After he left for school, I locked every door and pulled the curtains closed. The house felt too quiet, too still, like the air itself was holding its breath. The dress stood on the mannequin, beautiful and restored, but now it looked sinister, like something that should not exist anymore, something dangerous. I approached it slowly. My fingertips brushed the seams I had repaired, and a wave of dread washed over me. What had this dress witnessed? What had Elena endured while wearing it? And why bring it to me? Was she trying to leave evidence behind? Was I part of her escape plan, one she never got to finish? I couldn't stop imagining her at my doorway, eyes filled with terror. She refused to speak aloud. I knew then that doing nothing was no longer an option. I had something she meant for someone, or something specific. I just didn't know what, or who. My phone vibrated on the counter, jolting me. A text from an unknown number. "Is the dress ready?" My heart slammed against my ribs. It couldn't be Elena. She was gone. Someone else had her phone. Someone who believed she had a reason to pick it up. Hands shaking, I typed back, "Who is this?" No response. A minute passed, then 2. Then, "Bring it to the Riverside Hotel tonight, same room as before." My knees nearly buckled. Whoever this was, they expected her. They expected the dress. They had no idea that she was dead. Or worse, they did. The newspaper headline flashed through my mind, followed by the warning written on the back of the photograph. Burn everything, but burn what and why? My pulse hammered as I picked up the envelope again, searching for anything I missed. A second piece of paper slid out, nearly invisible before, tiny, folded, fragile. I opened it carefully. Inside was an address, not the Riverside Hotel, a small apartment on the south side of town, the poor side, the forgotten side. Under the address were 3 words, "Trust no one." I didn't know who to believe anymore, Elena's fear, the mysterious texter, or the creeping instinct that I had stepped into something lethal. But one thing was clear, someone wanted that dress, and I had it. And Eleanor, whatever she was trying to escape, had chosen me as her last, desperate hope. I couldn't ignore that, Not when her eyes, filled with terror and pleading, still haunted me. As the afternoon dragged on, paranoia followed me like a second shadow. Every car that slowed near my house made me jump. Every knock, or imagined knock, sent a bolt of panic through my chest. At one point I saw a figure standing across the street, unmoving, watching. When I blinked, they were gone. Or maybe they had been a trick of my fraying nerves. By evening, I had made up my mind. I would not go to the Riverside Hotel. Whoever sent that message was dangerous. And if Elena told me to trust no one, I wouldn't hand her last piece of truth to a stranger. Instead, I grabbed my car keys, wrapped the dress carefully, and tucked the photograph into my pocket. I needed answers. And the only lead I had was the address Elena left behind. I slipped out the back door, locked everything behind me, and drove into the fading light. The south side streets were quiet, almost eerily so. When I reached the address, my headlights illuminated a run-down apartment building with peeling paint and boarded windows. I parked and sat still, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Something about this place felt wrong, too abandoned, too empty. And then I saw it, spray-painted across the front door in messy red letters. One word: run. I stared at the words splashed across the door. Run, thick, jagged and smeared, like whoever wrote it had done so in a frantic rush. The letters dripped down the wood, glowing faintly under the streetlight, almost like fresh blood even though I knew it wasn't. My breath came shallow. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to listen to that warning, to get back in my car and pretend none of this was happening. But I had come too far to turn around now. Elena had trusted me with her last moments, her last plea, and even though I didn't understand why, I couldn't abandon her story. Not yet. Clutching the dress in its protective bag, I stepped onto the cracked sidewalk. The air felt colder here, sharp and metallic, biting at my skin. I pushed open the front door, flinching as rusty hinges groaned louder than they should have. Inside, the hallway was dim and narrow, lit only by a flickering bulb that buzzed like a dying insect. Peeling wallpaper revealed mould underneath, and the place smelled of damp wood and old secrets. I followed the unit number written on Elena's note. Apartment 3B. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step sounding like a warning shot. By the time I reached the second floor, I was certain someone, or something, was listening. I reached 3B and knocked gently. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. The silence pressed against my ears, too thick, too expectant. I checked the handle. It turned easily. Too easily. The door swung open with a soft sigh, revealing a small, dim apartment. It looked empty at first glance, but not abandoned. A single lamp glowed in the corner, casting long shadows across the floor. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat on the table. A chair was pushed back as if someone had stood up in a hurry. My pulse thundered as I stepped inside. "Hello?" My voice sounded foreign, paper-thin. No response. I walked further in, fighting the urge to turn back. The walls were lined with photographs, hundreds of them. Some pinned neatly, others taped, others overlapping in chaotic layers. And every single one showed the same man from Elena's photograph. The man whose suit I had stitched. The man whose grip around Elena's arm had told a story she hadn't dared speak. He was pictured with different women, in different locations, always smiling, always holding on to them like they weren't people but possessions. Some of the women looked happy, some didn't, some looked terrified. A chill spread through my entire body. What was this place? Who collected these photographs, and where were they now? I stepped closer, scanning the wall. That's when I noticed something else. Certain photos were marked with red ink. Small circles around women's faces. Some women had dates written under them. Some had no dates at all. And some had black X's. My stomach twisted violently. I searched for Elena's face, knowing, dreading. When I found her picture, my breath caught. Her photo had a date scribbled beneath it. Yesterday. The day she died. I felt my knees weaken, a cold sweat breaking across my skin. I stumbled back, forcing air into my lungs. This wasn't just some creepy collection. This was documentation, tracking, targeting. Someone had been watching her, studying her, planning something, and she had known. That's why she ran. That's why she brought me the dress. That's why she warned me to trust no one. I turned away, trying to steady myself, when a soft thud came from the back of the apartment. My heart nearly stopped. I froze, listening. Another thud, louder. Something, or someone, was in the next room. Panic surged through me, thick and suffocating. My fight-or-flight instinct kicked in, but my legs refused to move. I forced myself to take one quiet step, then another, edging toward the hallway. The air smelled different here, musty, metallic, almost like iron. I pushed the door open just an inch, enough to see inside, and what I saw shattered the last fragile piece of calm I had left. The room was covered floor to ceiling in red string and pinned photos like a deranged investigator's wall. At the centre was a large corkboard, and on that board was me. A photograph taken from outside my shop, dated 2 weeks ago. Another from the grocery store. One of me walking my son to school. My breath trembled as tears stung my eyes. How long had someone been watching me? Why me? What did they want? I stepped back, trembling violently, but then another realization hit me like a blow to the chest. Underneath my photo, fresh red ink, a date. Today. My vision blurred as fear surged through me, pounding in my temples. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun, heart slamming against my ribs, but no one was there. Not in the hallway, not in the living room, not in the kitchen. I was alone. At least that's what I prayed was. Still true, I didn't wait to find out. I grabbed the dress, bolted out of the apartment, and sprinted down the stairs so fast I nearly fell. The word "run" on the front door glared at me as I pushed into the cold night air, gasping. My hands shook so badly I fumbled the car keys twice before finally unlocking the door. As soon as I started the engine, my phone buzzed again. A text from the same unknown number. "You shouldn't have gone there." My blood ran cold. A second text followed immediately. "Bring the dress now, before it's too late." My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, the phone still glowing with the message I wished I hadn't read. "You shouldn't have gone there." The words pulsed in my mind like a warning siren, each beat syncing with my racing heart. Whoever was texting me knew exactly where I had been. They knew I found the apartment. They knew I saw the photos. And if they knew that much, then they also knew I wasn't just holding a dress anymore. I was holding the truth Eleanor had died for. Panic clawed at my chest, urging me to drive anywhere but home. But fear for my son cut through everything. Whoever was watching me, whoever had circled my picture with today's date, knew where I lived. They knew my routine. They had seen us. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes as I sped through the dark streets. I didn't know who to call, and Elena's message echoed in my mind. Trust no one. I couldn't go to the police. If the man in the photos had influence, money, connections, which he clearly did, I might be handing myself directly to the people hunting me. I couldn't go to friends. I would only put them in danger. The only option left was to get home, get my son, and disappear until I figured out what to do. But when I turned onto my street, my stomach dropped. A black sedan I didn't recognise was parked directly across from my house, headlights off, windows tinted so dark I couldn't make out a single silhouette inside. It hadn't been there when I left earlier. My breath hitched. My instincts screamed that someone was inside watching, waiting. I drove past slowly, trying not to turn my head, but my pulse quickened as I felt the weight of unseen eyes tracking me. I circled the block instead of parking, heart pounding. I needed time to think. I needed a plan. On my second pass, the sedan was still there, completely still, like a predator crouched in silence. My son was inside the house. alone. That thought almost made me pull over and run to him, but I forced myself to stay calm. Charging in blindly could get us both killed. Instead, I parked 2 streets away and took the back alleys home, staying in the shadows. My neighbourhood looked unfamiliar in the dark, every porch light a spotlight, every rustle sounding like footsteps. When I reached my backyard, I crouched low, scanning for movement. Nothing. I unlocked the back door with trembling hands and slipped inside. Quietly. The house was still. Too still. "Evan?" I whispered. Silence. A cold wave washed over me. I moved quickly down the hall, checking each room. His toys were scattered the same way he had left them that morning. His cereal bowl still sat in the sink. The small things comforted me, but the silence pressed down on my chest like a weight. I reached his bedroom and pushed the door open. Relief nearly brought me to my knees when I saw him sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling in steady breaths. Thank God. I sat on the edge of his bed, brushing a curl from his forehead. Just the sight of him gave me strength I didn't know I had left. I had to protect him, no matter what. I returned to the living room, pacing as I tried to calm the storm inside my head. The dress sat on the table where I'd dropped it earlier, shimmering faintly in the dim lamplight. It no longer looked elegant or fragile. It looked cursed, a piece of a puzzle that was pulling me deeper into something far more sinister than I could have imagined. My phone buzzed again. I flinched, checking the screen with dread tightening around my throat. "Last chance! Bring the dress! Don't make this worse!" My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether to respond, but before I could type anything, another message came through. A photo. It took a second for my brain to process what I was seeing. My house, my living room window, taken from outside, taken tonight. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. Someone was out there. Someone was watching. I hurried to the window and peeked out through a thin slit between the curtains. Darkness, stillness, but the kind that hides things, not the kind that protects. I locked every door and window, double-checking each one. Then I grabbed my old duffel bag and started packing. Clothes for my son, essentials, anything we could carry. We needed to leave, now. As I stuffed the last items into the bag, a soft tapping sound came from the front door. My heart stopped. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not frantic, not accidental. Patient. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The knocking came again, a little firmer. My phone buzzed. A new message. "Open the door. We need to talk." My blood turned to ice. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers, but halfway through the call, doubt hit me like a punch. What if Elena was right? What if calling the police only made things worse? What if help wasn't coming? The knocking stopped. Silence stretched out like a blade. Then a low voice spoke through the door, muffled but clear enough to freeze me in place. "I know you're in there, and I know you have the dress." I backed away slowly, clutching the duffel bag. The voice continued, calm and confident, like he knew exactly how this would end. "You can't run from this, not anymore." My son stirred in his room, and the sound jolted me to action. I grabbed the dress, the duffel bag, my keys, everything, and moved toward the back door. If we stayed, we were dead. If we left, we had a chance. I had no idea where we would go or who was hunting us, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Tonight, our lives would never be the same again. The night swallowed us the moment we stepped outside, the air thick with the kind of silence that makes your skin prickle. I carried my son in my arms, his head resting groggily against my shoulder, still half asleep and blissfully unaware of the danger closing in on us. The duffel bag thumped softly against my hip with each hurried step, and the dress, wrapped tightly in my grip, felt heavier than fabric should ever feel, as if Elena's fear had soaked into every stitch. I moved through the backyard, sticking close to the fence line, my heart pounding so hard it felt like footsteps behind me. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every rustle of leaves sounded like someone breathing. I kept my eyes on the alley, praying no one was waiting there. Once we reached my car parked 2 streets away, I strapped Evan into the back seat, whispering for him to stay quiet, though he barely stirred. My hands trembled so violently, I dropped the keys twice before finally getting the engine to start. The headlights stayed off until I was sure we were far enough from the house that no one could see us pulling away. Then, when we hit the edge of town, I turned them on. The road ahead stretched into darkness, empty and unforgiving. I didn't have a destination. I just needed to drive, to put distance between us and whoever had stood at my front door. But as the miles slipped beneath the tyres, my mind raced faster than the car. The man in the photographs, the apartment covered in faces, the date written under my picture. Whoever he wasn't just stalking women, he was hunting them, and now I was on his list. The highway lights flickered overhead, and the hum of the engine filled the silence. My son finally woke fully, his voice small and confused. "Mum, where are we going?" My throat tightened. "Somewhere safe," I whispered, though the words tasted like a lie. His fingers curled around mine from the back seat, and I felt the weight of everything on my shoulders pressed down harder. I couldn't break in front of him. I had to be stronger than my fear, even if it was tearing me apart from the inside. I drove until the town faded into the rearview mirror, until the roads turned from smooth pavement to cracked asphalt, and the world outside became nothing but scattered farmhouses and endless fields. When I finally spotted a small 24-hour diner glowing faintly at the edge of the road, I pulled into the parking lot, needing a moment to breathe, to think, to figure out what came next. Inside, the diner smelled of burnt coffee and old leather, the kind of place where truck drivers came to escape the night. I chose a booth in the corner, placing my son beside me and keeping my back to the wall so I could see every entrance. The waitress, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, poured us water without asking. I forced a smile I didn't feel, hoping she couldn't see the storm inside me. Evan nibbled on a grilled cheese while I sipped coffee I didn't taste, my gaze flicking between the windows and the dress still wrapped at my side. I needed answers, more than what Elena had given me. I pulled out the photograph again, studying the man's face. Charismatic, confident, dangerous. The kind of man who believed consequences were for other people. But it wasn't just him. Someone else had been tracking all those women. Someone else had been monitoring me. Someone with access and intent. My stomach twisted. There had been a second detail in the apartment I hadn't had time to process. Among all the photos of the women, one board had records, notes, dates, times and locations, like a ledger, a hunting schedule. My fingers tightened around the photo. I had to find out who these people were, how many of them there were, how far they would go to get this dress back. My thoughts were interrupted when the diner door opened and a man walked in. My breath hitched. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat. His eyes scanned the room slowly, not searching, hunting. I grabbed Evan's hand under the table, squeezing hard. The man took a seat at the counter, back turned to us, but something about him made panic claw up my throat. I leaned close to my son. "We have to go," I whispered. His eyes widened, but he nodded without a word. We slipped out quietly, staying low behind the parked trucks until we reached the far end of the lot. I strapped him into the car again, my hands shaking. Then a sound sliced through the night, my phone buzzing. I didn't want to look. I already knew. Slowly, I pulled it from my pocket. A new message. "Running only makes it worse." My vision blurred with terror. I shoved the phone back into my bag and started the car. But before I could reverse, headlights suddenly flared behind us, blinding, hot, too close. A vehicle had pulled in silently while we were hiding behind the trucks. A black SUV, the same one I had seen outside my house? My pulse hammered violently. I shifted into drive and slammed my foot on the pedal. The tyres screeched as we shot forward, veering onto the empty highway. In the rearview mirror, the SUV followed. No hesitation, no distance, like it had been waiting for this moment. I pushed the gas harder, weaving down the dark road, praying for a path, for safety, for anything. Evan clutched his seatbelt, eyes wide with fear. "Mom!" "It's okay," I lied, my voice breaking. But nothing about this was okay. The SUV gained on us slowly, deliberately, like a predator enjoying the chase. And in that moment, with the night stretching endlessly ahead and the danger closing in behind, I understood one terrible truth. Who they were didn't matter anymore. What they wanted didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was surviving long enough to keep my son alive. The highway blurred beneath us as I pushed the car faster than I ever had, the engine groaning in protest while the SUV stayed glued to my tail like a shadow I couldn't outrun. The darkness around us felt alive, closing in from all sides as if the night itself conspired to trap us. Every instinct screamed that if they caught us now, this story wouldn't end with another warning message or a knock at the door. It would end with silence, the kind Elena carried to her grave. My hands were slick with sweat, slipping slightly on the steering wheel, but I couldn't loosen my grip. Evan was in the back seat, too terrified to speak, his eyes wide and glistening. Every time the SUV surged closer, its headlights pierced through the rear window like a spotlight locked on its prey. I scanned the road ahead desperately for an exit, a turn, a miracle, anything that could break this chase. But the highway stretched straight and empty, miles of black asphalt with no promise of salvation. Then I saw it. A sign for an old service road, nearly hidden by overgrown weeds, and leaning like it had forgotten its purpose. It wasn't a safe route. It wasn't even a logical one. But it was something. I yanked the wheel sharply, veering off the main road. Gravel and dust exploded beneath the tyres as we bounced violently across the uneven path. The SUV overshot the turn for a moment, and I felt a tiny, desperate surge of hope until its tail lights flickered as it swung aggressively around. They were coming back. Harder, faster, determined. The service road twisted through a dense patch of woods, branches scraping the sides of the car like skeletal fingers dragging across metal. Evan whimpered, covering his ears as the noise grew louder. "Almost there," I whispered, though I had no idea where there was. The road ended abruptly at a cluster of decrepit buildings, abandoned maintenance sheds forgotten by time. I slammed on the brakes, heart thrashing as the car skidded to a stop. I didn't have a plan. I barely had breath, but I knew staying inside made us sitting targets. The SUV's engine roared in the distance, getting closer, tearing through the night. I unbuckled Evan and grabbed his hand. "We need to hide," I hissed. My voice trembled, but urgency gave me strength. We sprinted toward the nearest building, a rusted tin structure with a broken door hanging off one hinge. The moment we stepped inside, darkness swallowed us whole. I pressed a finger to my lips, urging Evan to stay silent as we crouched behind an old workbench. My chest tightened with every inhale, each breath sounding too loud, too revealing. Outside, the SUV screeched to a stop. Doors slammed. Footsteps, multiple, crunched over gravel. Not one man, not two, more. My blood ran cold. A group, an organised one. Voices murmured outside, low and deliberate. "Spread out! She couldn't have gotten far!" Another voice, deeper, controlled. "Find the dress. Bring it to me." Him. The man from the photographs, the one with the cold smile. He was here. The air felt thinner, harder to pull into my lungs. Evan clung to me, trembling violently. I wrapped an arm around him, trying to steady his shaking. Outside, flashlight beams swept across the ground, their glow slipping through cracks in the shed walls like invasive fingers. One beam hovered too long near the door, creeping closer. I held my breath. The beam moved on. Not yet, not yet. Then, suddenly, my phone vibrated, loud, violent. The sound shattered the darkness like a gunshot. Evan gasped. I slapped my hand over the phone, silencing it, but it was too late. Footsteps shifted, voices rose. "Over there!" Panic detonated inside me. I grabbed Evan's hand and pulled him toward the back of the shed, feeling along the wall for any way out. The footsteps were getting closer, fast, purposeful. My hand brushed a loose panel and I pushed hard. It bent outward just enough to squeeze through. "Go!" I whispered urgently, lifting Evan and sliding him out first. He landed quietly on the dirt outside. I squeezed out after him, scraping my side against the metal, but pain meant nothing compared to the terror on the other side of the shed. Flashlights burst through the doorway as boots pounded toward the workbench where we'd been hiding seconds earlier. "She was here!" a voice barked. "Search the perimeter!" I didn't wait. I grabbed Evan's hand and ran deeper into the woods behind the building, branches whipping against our faces, the cold air slicing through my lungs. We ran blindly, stumbling over roots and rocks, the shouts behind us getting louder. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but stopping wasn't an option. Not when I could hear them spreading out, coordinating the hunt like a pack of wolves closing in on injured prey. A root caught my foot, sending me crashing to the ground. The dress slipped from my grip, sliding across the dirt. Evan knelt beside me, his little hands shaking my arm, but I shoved myself upright. We didn't have time. Footsteps thudded closer. Flashlights flickered through the trees. I grabbed the dress, clutching it to my chest as we ran again, tears streaming down my cheeks. We burst through the tree line onto another narrow road, one I didn't recognise, just as a pair of headlights rounded the bend. I flinched, pulling Evan behind me, ready to flee again, but the car slowed, stopped. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out, not part of the men chasing us, not anyone I recognised. Her expression was tense but not threatening. "Get in if you want to live," she said firmly, eyes locked on mine. I hesitated for a split second, torn between instinct and terror, until shouts erupted behind us, closer than ever. The woman's voice sharpened. "Now!" I shoved Evan into the car and climbed in after him, slamming the door shut, just as beams of flashlights broke through the trees. The woman floored the gas, and the world lurched forward. As we sped into the darkness, Evan sobbing quietly in my arms, I looked at the stranger behind the wheel. Her jaw was clenched, her eyes fixed on the road. And then she said the words that made my blood freeze. "I knew Elena, and I know who killed her."